and love to all the kings and queens. You are watching and listening to the Make Jazz Trill Again podcast. I am your host, Melanie Charles.
And I'm your co-host, Yunie Mojica, aka Yunie Mo.
We're very excited to be recording and filming on location here at Skidmore College, specifically the Zankel Music Center. And we have a special guest. We are very excited.
Yes.
We've been wanting to make this happen for such a long time. And luckily, Janelle said, you know what, I can help you guys make this happen. And so here we are. Yunie, let the people know who we got with us today.
We have a very, very, very special guest today. Someone who has been a mentor to Melanie and has, by way of pseudo for me, just because of the work that she's done, has been a mentor in my mind, just because of the like I said, the work that she's done. She is an NEA jazz master. She is an incredible drummer whose voice resonates throughout the community on the drum and as an advocate and activist in the jazz community in particular, because she has founded and runs the program at Berkeley for jazz and gender justice, which has been pivotal and groundbreaking. She's performed with so many jazz icons and is an icon herself, such as Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, just to name a few, and has also performed on live television as well, like the Arthur Hall show. And she's is gracing our presence today. And please welcome Terri Lyne Carrington.
I guess I want to start first by saying thank you. Yunie used the word mentor, and I even though we haven't spent much time together, in the few moments that we've shared space, you have always said a little something that has stuck to me, and I want to take this time to give you your flowers and just thank you for how you show up for women, all women across the globe that are interested in music, in jazz specifically, in Black American music. You've really been a blessing to my life, so I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
And I guess let's start talking about mentorship, because I feel like you were really lucky to be surrounded by incredible musicians from a very young age. We were listening to your music earlier as you guys were coming in. Terri Lyne Carrington and Friends was the name of that album. You recorded it when you were 16 years old. Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
And it was in the vault for some time, and only recently it came out. But can you speak a little bit about that experience? Because you were the youngest person in that band, and it was your project. What was that like?
Yeah, I think I've been the youngest person most of my life up until the last, 10, 15, 20 years. But I was always the youngest person, so I was used to that and was very comfortable around elders and learned the music that way. So on that particular recording, it was Kenny Barron on piano, Buster Williams on bass, and George Coleman on saxophone.
Wow.
And my dad also played sax on the track. But my story is basically my dad giving me access literally and figuratively to the jazz stage. And I realized that that's not only not what a lot of young women have, but not what a lot of young musicians have in general. He knew everybody. He was just one of those guys that knew everybody. So when people would come to town, he would introduce me to them and tell them I was playing and that I could keep time, or that I could, play something with them. And they would say, well, I want to hear. So I developed a little bit of a reputation in the Boston area. And so many musicians came from New York that it was easy to meet and play with a lot of people without living in New York. And then we would make some trips to New York. So I have to really give my father so much credit, because he wanted a son to carry on this musical tradition in our family. I'm a third generation musician. So I guess the gender justice starts with my dad actually accepting that he had a daughter that could possibly carry on this musical tradition in the family, and him not stifling me with his own thoughts of even having wanted a son. But as far as mentoring, it's funny, I've mentored more young men, than I have women, because even while teaching at Berkeley, when I was teaching mostly drum lessons and ensembles and drum labs, I had very few female students. And then one day, I started talking to some of the young women that had a group called Women in Jazz Collective. And I went to one of their meetings that they invited me to, and I started hearing their stories and really opening up my heart and not expecting them to be like me. And once I could not tell them just the advice, because often when we give advice or when we teach, it's based on what we've done, what we know, and what's been taught to us. Mm-hmm. And I realized that everything that was taught to me wasn't great. It worked for me though, but it's not going to work for everybody. Yes. So, and I was always a fighter, and I stood up to people, and I wasn't intimidated, and my parents raised me that way, and they raised me to believe that this was my music, and I had every right to be there. They didn't even say those words, but that's what I came up with. And so I would tell, young women at Berkeley, just let it roll down like water down your back. Just don't think about that. Just plow ahead. And I wasn't acknowledging the extra burdens that they had, any pain, that they've gone through by this industry. So once I finally opened my heart in that way, my trajectory changed, because I decided, it's kind of like a Pandora's box. Once you open it, you can't unsee it. So I was like, I have to focus on this.
Was there a moment that kind of like made you make that shift, or did it just kind of just grow over time?
I guess I had started, like I did a couple of records celebrating women musicians, Mosaic Project. I did 2 records like that were all female, but I wouldn't even in interviews, I wouldn't talk about it as if it were a social statement. Right. I would say, these are my friends, and I recognize that I'm not the only woman anymore. Like when I was 16, like on that recording, I didn't see any other women drummers. When I finally got to college at Berkeley, full-time, well, maybe it wasn't, because I started Berkeley when I was 11, and going once a week, and then I went full-time at 17. And somewhere around 16 or 17, I met Cindy Blackman, and she was at Berkeley. And that was the first time, basically. And I met Sheila E. actually about the same time.
Giants.
Sheila E.
So those were the first 2 women I ever saw. Sheila was mostly playing percussion, but those were the first 2 other women I saw playing. But I had already been playing for 10 years or so.
It's easy to be, if you're a female musician, the only one. It seems like they only have patience for one. Okay,
exactly.
they only got one girl in the mix, that's enough.
Right, and then you're a token.
Yeah, and then you're the token.
Tokenism, yeah. Regarding I'm so curious about the Gender in Jazz program that you've built. And I have my own qualms about jazz education growing up into it, about when it comes to the residual side effects after going through it, and especially when it comes to gender and jazz justice. Is there anything, in the program, what's different about it now?
Well, I don't know what your residual effects, what the residual effects are, other than I know that many of our students say this is the first time they've been in another class, another ensemble playing with other women. And I always clarify that this is not a women's institute. We have just as many men in the institute as women, and also some non-binary students. But the idea is that when we talk about gender justice, it's not about separating women. And I don't feel like anymore that's helpful. I do understand it, especially at a young age, like in high school, junior high school, maybe some of that's still happening, because it's going to make people really at a younger age that are developing feel secure enough to make mistakes and to, that kind of camaraderie that you'll have with other girls at that age. But when we're talking about the professional world, or even college into the professional world, we have to do this together, because gender justice is the responsibility of everybody. It's going to benefit everybody. And so even recently, I was on a phone call or Zoom with someone that was going to be helping co-sponsor an event. And he said, well, I'm just going to step out the way, as the man here. And I was like, no.
Right.
We don't want you to step out the way.
Perspectives.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even the perspective, as we do want your perspective, but and then he said, well, see, because sometimes people say they want to be your ally. And I said, we don't need allies, we need partners. Because even using the word ally, to me, makes a separation. It almost sounds like hierarchy.
Yeah.
Like, you're having this problem, so I'm gonna be an ally to you for this problem you're having.
And rescue you in this problem.
Savior
And so I'm like, I
mentality.
don't like the word ally, because there's no hierarchy here. This is everybody's problem, and we need to be all in this together if we want society to be the best it can be. Right. And I always say, if you love the music, then you would want to have gender justice. You would want to have these different perspectives so that the music itself can reach its greatest potential. It will never reach its greatest potential if just men are playing it. You're missing a whole world
Of perspective and sound.
And so if you're okay with that, then I guess we don't have a lot to talk about, you know.
I like the tagline of the program when I looked at this, what would jazz sound like in a culture without patriarchy? Like, what a wild question when we sit down and allow ourselves to dream about what that would have sounded like up till now. Now you're doing the work to sort of change the infrastructure. But I can't help but to imagine all of the amazing female musicians historically that we will never know, never was able to hear because of the patriarchy.
Because their voices are stifled in silence.
I mean, I wonder sometimes, what would Ella Fitzgerald have sounded like if you put a horn in her mouth when she was a kid and not told her to sing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder what Sarah Vaughan or Carmen McRae would have sounded like, or even Aretha Franklin. I mean, we're so glad that she sang, though.
Yes, right. We need Aretha to sing. Yes.
All of them, but especially Aretha. But when you hear her playing, there's been a couple of times on 2 records that recordings that I didn't know it was her playing, and it goes into something that feels more jazz-like, and then I realized later that it was her playing, and so I'm checking myself, like, why did I assume?
Right.
There's a one Spirit in the Dark with her and Ray Charles, and I heard the live recording, but the video came out, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and then I saw it was actually Aretha playing. All those years I thought it was Ray Charles.
Oh.
So you have to check your own biases.
Yes. Like, you imagine a man playing and not necessarily a woman. And those.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that Ray can play. Like.
Well, it must have been him, right? I think I also am curious, just infrastructurally, about the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice. I'm curious, and especially for any students that might want to study there one day. Like, it's part of Berkeley, right? But do people take classes? Can you take those in both spaces? Can you take all your classes at your institute? How does that really work?
No, we really started as just we're part of the performance division.
Okay.
And we service ensembles, and we have a space that you can come and do all of your ensemble classes in an environment that is supportive, where you feel like you can let your hair down, make mistakes. And the first thing that I noticed is so many men gravitated to it because so many young men are rejecting the hypermasculinity that has been attached to jazz for so long. Now, here's the thing, I'm a product of that. I play, I used to anyway, because I'm now challenging myself not to play that way. But, I've always played kind of like with a lot of fire, because that's the only way I could work. So any women that were successful were basically assimilating into this sound, to work. You had to sound like as good as the next guy.
Yeah.
It couldn't be about anything feminine, really, or we don't even know what that means when it comes to sound, the sound aesthetic. Right? So, so there's so many of these young men that are like rejecting that, but then, just because I'm old school, I'm so used to hearing that fire, I'm always like, push a little harder, come on, let's go.
Yes,
But,
I totally relate to that as especially as a saxophonist too, and alto in particular, with Jackie McLean's sound, and that is to me like a very fiery, to the wall sound.
I feel like I remember when I was at the New School, though, that there were a couple of female sax players that I think they wanted to show that they were as good as the men, and that just meant that they played loud, but not necessarily musically, So, but I get it. There's so much pressure.
Yeah, but it's all that kind of thinking. Men don't have to think about that. That's an extra burden in itself, to have to think, how do I prove to this dominant group that I belong here? And that's just too much to think about. I mean, I still think about that. And
really?
I mean, oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Because I still get comments from people, like I still have people that know my name, have even heard a record or something, maybe not seen me live, but just they know who I am, that are surprised that I sound decent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can see it, you can feel it, they'll even say it. So I'm like, wow, so I'm still, you still have some kind of preconceived, maybe it was a fluke, like even I thought it was a fluke, just certain things.
With you?
Like, I'm like, okay, I won a Grammy, that was great, oh, I won 2, well, oh, that must be a fluke. Wait,
I think at this point it's not a fluke no more.
No, but I'm saying this is this kind of imposter syndrome and all of those things that we all deal with on any level, and I only admit that because I want people to know that if you're dealing with that, it's real, and it may, you have to do work for that stuff to stop. It doesn't just go away.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. To hear that from someone like you who has been doing this for so long and have gotten the accolades and the honor and playing amongst giants, I would never think that you would have that.
I'm shocked to hear you say that. It's very good to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
It's relatable. Yeah. It's so relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, on the same, or on the other hand, I'm confident.
Yes.
But it doesn't take away, we're all complex.
Yes.
So just because I'm confident, it comes across sometimes that way. People may not think that I have self-doubt and all those things, but I mean, also most artists, well, I won't say most, but a lot of artists are very self-critical, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to think you're a fluke on it, even if you're not a woman, right? If you're self-critical, you're like,
your own worst critic.
No, why do they like this record?
And that's a handicap. I actually really suffer with that in a really bad way. We actually did a gig together last year. Thank you so much for bringing me into that. And after the gig, I ran into the dressing room crying, like, I sucked. And you really were so kind and supportive and gentle to me in that moment. So thank you for that. I kind of want to talk a little bit what you were trying to say about the institutions, because I'm curious, because you were killing before you went to Berkeley, right? So you don't need to credit jazz school for your musicianship. But I'm conflicted as well to how it's almost like a currency. Like if you pay $30,000, you too can sound good on trumpet. I feel like we've lost that natural way of navigating this music when it was like just in our culture where we went to church and we were, singing in the choir, playing in a church band. More and more, it's just like you pay this money and with the hopes that you're going to be a working, successful musician. How do you feel about that nuance between the developing naturally versus going through an institution?
Well, I think so many musicians, jazz musicians, do have a certain amount of what someone might call natural talent, an affinity to the music, something that you may have grown up listening to, something that's, it doesn't necessarily have to be in your DNA, but you could be somebody that assimilates well. Like you hear this, like I don't know if it was in my DNA, it may be because my grandfather was a drummer, but my father played it from before I was born. He played music so loud that I'm totally confident that I was hearing it from the womb because it's always so loud. So I know the babies can feel and hear vibrations, right? So I feel like it was there for me to grasp if I had an interest in it. So I feel like, maybe when I sat down, it was considered, natural. And even people use the word prodigy, but I never, liked that term because I wasn't doing anything academic, and I wasn't, I wasn't reading, and that stuff came later. But it was just a natural feeling, right, for the music. That is so important, and it's what you can't necessarily teach. I mean, I have actually had students from, I think it was Japan or Korea, that said, can you teach me black jazz feel? And I was like, I don't think I can, but I can point you in these directions. And if this is something that you want, you're gonna have to do a lot of listening and studying, but it's about self-discovery. Nobody can actually really teach you any of that. Like, you can just point people in a direction. Like, if I hear somebody, I say, well, I feel like this exercise would be good for you because I hear this hole in your playing. Your technique is missing this.
Right.
So maybe if you practice this, you'll address that. But the actual nuts and bolts of what your creativity, no teacher can, how do you teach somebody creativity? I don't think that's possible.
Right.
Or field, really.
So right. So thank you. Like, you're putting words to what I'm saying. So how are we getting graded in music school when it's like art? Like,
because I mean, well, I've always been critical of it, and it's kind of, I guess, a little hypocritical because I make a living teaching too, but at least I'm trying to be honest about it.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, this music came from an experience, and it was an experience, so interestingly enough, that other people from other cultures, especially in Europe, and eventually Asia and all these other places too, but that really gravitated to it and recognized it as a really unique, amazing art form. And as that started to happen, I think some, in our own culture that created this, it started moving on to other things. So it wasn't as, people made schools, jazz, the Jazz Academy started to learn and to dissect, learn how to, learn how to teach it, but also learn how to put it into this kind of European
how to contextualize it.
Yeah, well, as far as like the theory of it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people were thinking about the theory when they were, especially when they were playing the blues. Nobody was thinking about the theory of it. There is a theory behind it if you need theory to analyze something, to teach it. So, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I do joke with some hip hop friends sometimes, like, just wait till, there's more hip hop.
Well, that's happening at Berkeley right now, right? Isn't Radar Ellis one of the professors? Isn't he teaching hip hop at Berkeley right now?
Yeah, but it's just not as almost every, like, there's so many jazz programs, at schools across the country.
They're not hip.
Yeah, you don't have that with hip hop yet. I'm like, wait till that happens.
That is definitely going to happen. I feel that's definitely going to happen.
It's going to happen, you said.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable too, but I find it very interesting that this long has gone by, 50 years of hip hop, without it really happening, because it's remained kind of such a street credibility to it, and jazz went to the academy.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes sense. I mean, this is really interesting conversation. I'm going to try to be as succinct as I can, but it sort of makes sense to me because jazz musicians, and this is like a very, I haven't really thought about how to articulate it so well, but jazz musicians wanted a respectability and wanted to stop playing in brothels, bars and play on stages where classical music was.
Yeah.
So these things kind of started happening around the same time, right? So now you wear your suits and you go play at a symphony hall and present the jazz. I get it, why Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and all these people wanted to play in these concert halls. But, a couple of things happened, right? It helped to remove dance between leaving the actual physical place where dance could happen when you listen to it, and playing all this fast music and all this technically superb music that was harder to dance to.
Yeah.
So now you started a little bit removing the music from the people, in essence. And so it became a little less, I guess, of a folk music. This is just my spin on it.
Yeah.
There's people that would probably have great reasons to say what I'm saying is not true. But, so now it makes it less of a folk music, and we qualify it by things like technique and speed and harmony and what somebody's doing over this particular chord change, or all the theory behind it. Now it has this qualification of what makes it great. And nobody's and also when you're getting into these schools, you have to prove that you can do all this. You have to read, you have to have theory, but nobody's testing you on how well you play the blues or your time feel, like the feeling of rhythm. I mean, so people will say all day long, is it swinging or not? And use things like that. But you're not testing anybody on that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not, and then the essence of what that even was has changed and evolved. I mean, I don't particularly care to play swing anymore because I'm nostalgic with it. I just want to listen to the great records.
Right, they've already done it.
They already did it,
they've done it.
Yeah.
But we're still teaching that in schools. And I mean, it's taken me a long time to move away from even teaching standards, and because when I started teaching, I'm teaching how I was taught. You got to play, I do think you should learn bebop to some degree, because I think it's a school of its own that will make whatever you do better. It teaches you phrasing, it teaches you, a sense of linear, linear concepts with improvisation that, is important, but in a way of studying it, not to necessarily make it what you do, to inform what you do. Yes. But I feel like the academy, a lot of things happen. I think the people play now, if you take an instrument like the drums, but you can take any other instrument too, you're playing in these teeny rooms now all the time. This is how you learn the music. And everybody's telling you to play softer. And the sound has become squashed. It's become flat. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm trying to learn how to play more like that because it's become big part of the modern sound.
Adapt to the spaces.
Yeah, you adapt to the spaces, you adapt to technology of how it's, recorded, and you're not hearing the dynamics. Yeah. And so everybody starts to play like that. And it starts to feel like a monotone to me because I don't hear dynamics in the sound itself. And nobody's developing, I won't say nobody, I'm exaggerating, but people aren't developing their sound because they're in these small spaces. So the first thing I'm saying is, what happens if you get a gig tomorrow and you have to play in a stadium? Mm-hmm. How are you going to get your sound to the last person? Even a weak sound with microphones is just amplifying a bad sound, right?
Right. That's interesting. I feel like technology is kind of responsible of that, because I feel like 90s gospel, the drums just all got super dry, and I think because of the way they were recording at that time. I'm curious to know do you observe that, how the drums in 90s gospel kind of, I don't know, they don't inspire me as much.
Well, I think that became the era of gospel drumming when that started.
It got choppy, but the mixes just always sound so flat to me somehow.
Right, like they cut out the high ends.
Or something.
In those ways. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, maybe that's what we're saying, a similar thing with how technology can squash the sound to some degree, depending on how you're listening to it. But I do think learning in the church, you weren't necessarily as much being told. I think you learned dynamics, but you weren't being told to play soft, and and I mean, I used to have this conversation with Jerry Allen too, because people would tell me to play softer all the time, and she would say, no, play loud, you know.
Yeah.
Drums are a loud instrument. And then she one day said, they're trying to silence the drums. You know, I'm like, of course, who are they? But secondly, yeah, you know, critics, different people, you know, saying, you know, you play too loud at the Vanguard, or, you know, like these clubs and stuff. But I do feel like there is that kind of silencing into, like, you know, like taking away this core rhythm, this core part of what was so essential to the sound of jazz. And kind of making it more palatable in some ways, and taking out some of the emotion, the dirtiness, the anger, the, you know, some of those things. And I still go back to, these are not male things, you know what I mean? Like, you know, because if you're talking about like the sound of the music, and if you start speaking about it being a revolutionary kind of music, we still had that same problem with gender, with in the civil rights era, and, you know, with kind of men being on the front line, you know, but there were women doing, you know, so much work with that, and so it kind of translates in an interesting way to the music. I kind of switched gears and went back to the patriarchy of it all.
But it kind of always leads
It
back
always
to that,
leads back
doesn't it?
because it's the society that we live in. But I do want to shift gears a little bit outside of education, and you're now you've entered into the world of A&R and record labels and things like that, and it's a bit of a world that I'm not too versed in and familiar. But so you're currently working with Candid Records, which is extremely exciting, and just to have your voice in those spaces is so important. What led you to this point of making that shift to produce albums and find talent to record music?
Yeah, I always wanted to do that. From like in the 80s, I read a book called Hitman. If you don't know it, I think it's an interesting read. But it's just about the record industry and all the players at the time. And I feel like I was gravitating to that, why I even got the book. But, you know, so at the time, all of the A&R people at labels were attorneys, except for two that were successful. The two that weren't was Irving Azoff, who was a manager, and David Geffen. But everybody else, these great A&R men, were attorneys. And as far as women, I think the only two women even mentioned at all, with, you know, kind of a passing sentiment, may have been Suzanne DePass and Sylvia Rhone. So of course the first thing I noticed is we don't have a presence there, and that they called the book Hitman, you know. But at the time, like, I don't see gender with myself even. So if I read that, I'm like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah,
I want to do that. You know, and don't see, like, I didn't see necessarily glass ceilings. Then I started producing records, and, you know, I thought once I produced a record that was successful that I would get more calls to produce, but it didn't happen. I produced a Grammy, the first major record I produced was, other than my own, was for Diane Reeves, and it got her, I believe it was her first Grammy nomination.
Wow.
And so I thought, you know, I would get more along those lines, but definitely didn't happen like that. And now it's funny because now people are asking me to produce, and now I don't have the time.
Yeah.
You know, or really the desire, other than my own projects. So it's funny how that works. But as far as A&R, I always felt the knack for, you know, looking at, I won't say young talent, because even when I was young, but just people that I felt had something to offer that maybe weren't kind of in the mainstream of things.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic, I'll never forget this. I was taking a walk, and I was kind of just thinking about my life. I said, I always wanted to do A&R. And I said, well, that didn't happen, but so many things have happened. So I'm good with that didn't happen. And I'm just gonna take that off of the bucket list. And then within a couple of days, John Burke calls me and said, hey, you ever think about doing A&R?
See, when you release it, it happens.
Wow. Like, nope, this is right.
This is so hilarious. I'm like, you're not gonna believe this. I just took it off my bucket list.
Right.
It was really funny. And he was the person that signed me. I have a lot of respect for him.
I have a more of a numbers question. Like, do you have an idea of like what, like throwing a number out there of how much it costs to produce an album?
Well, it depends. I mean, first of all, we're in a time period where, especially when we talk about jazz.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't sell any records. You know, nobody's really selling records, not like they used to. My very first album in 1989 for Polygram sold 100,000 records, which was a lot of records for a jazz album back then. I was also on a TV show then. And, you know, then I won a Grammy for a record called Money Jungle, and at the after party, one of the current A&R people at the label said, this is so amazing that you won a Grammy and only sold 3,000 records. Which I didn't even know, so I was a little angry with him for even telling me that at that moment.
That's crazy.
And I'm trying to celebrate a win.
What a rude thing to say.
It shows it was still impactful anyway, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, critical acclaim does, you know, mean something. You know, you don't have to, you can have impact without sales.
Yeah.
But my point is, if you're not selling records, I mean, I know I don't sell records, but I try to make good records anyway.
Yeah.
So I invest in my records. And I've had the policy for a long time of licensing, you know, doing what might be considered long-term licensing. But I never get the license fee is never what I spend on the records. In fact, a record I do called Social Science, I had done 3 for Concord, and then Social Science was on a label, Motema Music. And I just gave her the record. And that felt, I don't know, it felt like a powerful thing to be able to do, you know?
Right.
I was like, just put your money into marketing it.
Right. You had already invested your money and completed it, and it was a complete. That way, you didn't have to have any creative input either, because it's your thing and it's already done.
Right.
Exactly, that too. And even after the fact, if you're not, you know, because now we're real partners, so you really can't, because sometimes even if somebody licensed and you'd spend your money on it and they license, they have a different kind of hold, you know, on it, because they feel like they own it for 10 years or whatever it is, right? But, so I was just, let's see how this works, where you just put your money into marketing. Just, you know, it's like the Wild Wild West, you know, like any deals are all different. And when independent music really started happening, it took the power, so to say, away from these labels, a lot of things shifted. But there's still nothing like a team of professionals that help your release, if they help.
Yeah.
If they help.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like a team of professionals that can kind of all come together at one moment for this one event. This record is coming out. We have all these people, even if they don't put but a couple of months into it, it's more than what you're going to do by yourself independently.
Yes.
So you're actually kind of paying for the expertise
Yeah.
of other people.
Yeah.
You're going to pay for it one way or another.
You will.
That labor.
I've been lucky to be a fly in the wall and watch you produce, whether it was in the room or hearing you over the phone telling the artist, try this, try that. And like a good meal, you need the salty, the sweet, the acid. What would you say are the ingredients for a really good album?
I don't think anybody's ever asked that. I don't know, there's a magic that happens that you know it when you hear it and you feel it on a track. I just wait for the magic, and then I keep throwing darts at it until it happens. You know, so it's you don't know what, that's the discovery part. You can have an idea, and I demo things pretty thoroughly for my own records, just so I can tell if that magic is possible. And so I may throw out, some things because it's just not, I just don't feel the magic is going to be there. But so there's a dance, like something that just makes you start to move a little bit. Even if it's not groove, it doesn't have to be a groove. It could be avant-garde, it could be free time-wise, but it's that thing that happens where it lights up your spirit, so to say. And so I just wait for that. It's a mystery. That's the mystery. And you're looking to convey, because it's all an illusion at the same time. You know what I mean? It's not real. Like, it's real, the energy, the effort, but at the end of the day, it's like this digital format. It's like
sound waves.
Yeah, it's not like anything tangible. It's not like a painting, like that's actual real that you're standing there looking at. So it's a bit of an illusion. So if because I'll go back and play the drums 3 times on a song, but it's gonna sound like even something that could be considered straight ahead or something. I'm gonna go back on it because most of the time these days, because I don't have time to practice, I'm not happy with the way I play most of the time. And I know because of technology that I can go back and do it again.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I was just saying that to my parents the other day. I went back and they were like, "You went back?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's all an illusion." Like,
how do you deal with demo-itis though? Because you listen to the demo, you finally found something good. For me, I find like if I'm doing too much, I kind of lose that spark.
Go ahead, keep talking.
Okay. I find that sometimes if I overthink, overproduce, change it around too much, I lose it. Like, how do you know when, okay, you've done enough? Or maybe how do you know what, let me go to that original. It was kind of messy, but it felt better than this like perfected thing.
that's part of the journey though, right? The search of it all. Like, you have to try things.
Yeah.
And it's totally fine to go back, right? Quincy Jones said, he was talking about a mix, but I take it also as production and writing, that he said you never finish a mix, you just abandon it. And I think that that's a similar thing with a song or production. You could keep going, but eventually you have to move on. And you find something and you just want to sit with it, right? And you say, yeah, this is enough.
Yeah.
And then it's also the mindset, something else, Bernice Johnson Reagan, who just passed away recently, who's the founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock. She said once, I am what I am at this particular moment, and that will have to be sufficient.
Ooh,
and I just live with that, I'll try to be okay because, we can all be perfectionists or think we're trying to do better and better. And often, and I'll just do another anecdote. I was in the studio with George Duke once working on a Diane Reeves record. And this is actually a song that you could stream, In Your Eyes. It's a Peter Gabriel song. It's on one of her records. I think it's Quiet. I don't remember. Quiet of the Storm or something. But anyway, and so Billy Childs wrote this arrangement, and we played it, and I felt like I was almost there. And George was like, "Okay, that's great. Let's move on." So I said, "No, let me have one more. No, I gotta do one more." And he said, "Okay." And then we went to start recording it again, and then he came over the headphones, said, "Terri Lyne, you tripping. We're not curing cancer here. We're just making a record." And so I think about that because every time I want to go back, and now when I listen to the track, there's kind of nothing wrong with it. I don't know what I was thinking I was going to do better, but it was just, I got to keep striving, and you can't always do that, especially on other people's time.
Yeah. You mentioned not playing, like you did some work to not just stay teaching the standards. And what I love is that you made an album called New Standards and a book called New Standards, which I'm very excited about, that whole concept of there's new music being written all the time, and we need to archive and put that together. Can you talk a little bit about why you were like, let me make this album and a book called New Standards?
First, I'm going to invite you right now to contribute a song to the next one, because I'm already gathering something for volume 2.
I would love to. Thank you.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think it was super simple that we started the Institute. We had our initial event, and I asked the students to play some songs written by women, and they really couldn't find any. And they looked in the real book, and they only found Willow Weep for Me, which is written by Anna Ronell. So I said that day, oh, this will be our first initiative then. Let's put a book together so that that doesn't happen again. So we have some alternatives to this jazz canon. I mean, we're not taking anything away from the amazing standards that were written by Cole Porter and Irving Berlin and George Gershwin and whomever else. And then the newer standards by Wayne Shorter and so many people that I love, so much music that I love. But we're just saying there's voices that have not been heard. There were people that were writing back then, beyond Lil Hardin Armstrong and Mary Lou Williams,
Right.
though they have songs in the book. But at least we kind of discovered one person that a lot of people didn't know. Her name is Sarah Cassie. And so I have a song in the book, but also on the record called Windflower. And she wrote, she was from Detroit, and I asked Ron Carter about her because he played some of her music. And he told me that she didn't play, she worked in a publishing house in New York. And she died very young, like in her 30s. But Hank Jones, Johnny Griffin, Ron Carter, Herb Ellis, they've all recorded some of her music.
Wow.
So it was nice to discover somebody, but there's, how many more? There's so many.
I'm sure.
So when you think about gender justice, there's that part of discovering, doing corrective work for the past. But then there's the part about what does it mean today and for the future, and they're two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like
It's time
we need
for
to go to Trill
Trivia. Okay, so there's this thing that we do called Trill Trivia, and we do it to all of our guests. Do it to, or
Uh-oh, you're all gonna put me on the spot. I feel it coming.
I sometimes try to make it easy. This one in particular was a little challenging for me to come up with some fun trivia. And we like to make it fun because, when you play trivia at a bar or whatever, like it's just a good time. And it always sparks really great conversation. But Mel, we gotta do our song.
That's not really our song. We didn't write it, but it's our rendition.
We got to pay the
okay?
royalties on that one. But the first question is, I feel like you're going to get it right away, but I'm not, and I usually add like A, B, or C. So this one's a little open-ended. Who was the drummer that was most known for recording with the Adderley Brothers?
The Adderley Brothers?
Yeah, Cannonball
And Nat? Well,
yeah.
Nat used to come to my house, and I subbed for.
This drummer?
Well, I mean, they had two, but, they had three in the end. But originally, it was Louis Hayes and then Roy McCurdy.
Yeah.
So the two of them would be the two most famous. But then by the time later on Jimmy Cobb was doing it, I subbed for him. But yeah. So you must have either Louis or Roy McCurdy, but they were both.
Ding, 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 ding. Extra credit.
Yes.
Okay.
5 points.
5 points. Boop, you're already winning. Second question is.
I already got the prize. Y'all gave me the
Yeah,
prize
you
earlier.
Here.
Oh, that's right. You did already get the prize.
Okay. Which trumpet player replaced Clifford Brown in Max Roach's band after his tragic passing?
Booker Little. It wasn't Booker Little? After Clifford Brown? Well, Booker Little did do Max's band, so let me think. Who was after?
I have choices.
Oh, you have choices. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that'll make it easier.
Is it A, Lee Morgan, B, Booker Little, which you just said, C, Kenny Durham, or D, Nicholas Payton?
That's a trick question. So wait, so so on the recordings I have mostly after that was Booker Little, but maybe, so you're saying it was either Kenny Dorham or Lee Morgan. I don't really have those records. So if it wasn't Booker Little, Kenny Dorham or Lee Morgan. I'm just trying to think of the timing. Like, I'm bad with years. Like, I'm trying to think of the ages. I mean, Kenny Dorham seemed more, he was older, but so Lee Morgan was younger. And I never really heard of Lee playing with his trajectory. I don't know, really, but I'll say Kenny Dorham.
Ding, 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 ding.
I don't have those records.
I actually found that out by way, because I thought it was Booker Little too. I found out by way of his daughter, Yvette Dorham.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, whoa, I didn't know that. So,
nice.
and it was his centennial this year, and it was also Max Roach's centennial this year as well. So,
Yep.
little through line.
Yep, it's still his centennial till January 10th.
Right. Yes. Celebrating the whole year.
Let him know. Last question. Which musician did not play or perform with the group Weather Report? Is it A, John Schofield, B, Lenny White, C, Wayne Shorter, or D, Victor Bailey?
Okay, well, we know Victor and Wayne were Weather Report. So Lenny White or John Schofield. These are short stints because I mean, you must be talking about either on a record or a record.
Yeah, just
or
in
a
general.
tour.
Pass through,
because I mean, I know those bands,
yeah.
and they, you know, like I might have missed somebody just on a track, but I mean, I don't remember John Schofield. I really don't remember Lenny White either, but that makes more sense to me than John Schofield.
So that you're who you going with? Who you going with?
Let me just.
I just didn't hear what you said.
No, I just said Lenny White makes more sense than
yes.
John Schofield to me.
Ding, 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 ding. Yay!
15 points for Terri
You
Lyne
won! I knew you would.
Carrington. She won. I did want to talk a little bit about the Grammys because I think every musician wants a Grammy, right? Like that's like the dream. And you made amazing music that has granted you many Grammys. And how would you say that has shifted things for you? I know you said, you know, you produce a Grammy award-winning album for Diane Reeves, thinking that would mean more production gigs, and it didn't work out in that time in that way. But what would you say shifted, if anything, for you as you started getting these Grammys?
Well, like I said, you know, you could say the first one was luck, the second one was, you know, even more luck. But by the time, you know, the third one, it's like, okay, so maybe I'm doing something right. If you judge, first of all, I'd like to say that you don't judge your success by a Grammy Award. You know, or by really, you know, any accolades, but we live in this capitalist, you know, this society where awards and things like that translate to money.
Yeah.
You know, so on some level, like you don't get a MacArthur or a Doris Duke Artist Award without having received some of these things before. And a lot of jazz people don't apply and don't do the things that even get you some of the smaller awards or grants to get you the bigger ones, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a catch-22, so to say. And then there's people that I really admire that have said, well, if I got a Grammy, that means I'm doing something wrong. You know, because they're so edgy musically that they're, you know, so they see it almost as a sellout kind of thing, you know. So then you come down to what is the real purpose, benefit, reason that you even want one, right? So there are, you know, it is creators voting for creators. So you feel that, and that's with kind of any award, really, you feel like if that has a panel of people that decide or people vote, especially if it's qualified voting. So that's why you have the readers poll and the critics polls, right, with Downbeat. You want
God, that poll.
Drama.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, readers polls popularity. So like, so that's the American Music Awards. That's popularity, right?
Yeah.
Based on sales or, you know, what the audience thinks. Whereas the Grammys are creators, you know, people in the business. Yeah. So I think that kind of peer recognition at the end of the day means something to you, to all of us.
Yes.
You know, and for me personally, I was never felt totally accepted by my peers. It was always by older, you know, the elders and older generation, like people old enough to be my parents or my grandparents. So to get any recognition that feels peer related was really, you know, special to me after feeling a little bit like a misfit or something.
Yeah.
With my own peer group. And then these days, younger people, you know, that feels great too because it's closer to my peer group. And I have mad respect for young people because I think younger artists are determining what's good and what's not right now. And they're determining the future in a sense of the music. So that's why it's important to me to be in that environment. So back to receiving a Grammy, yeah, peer recognition is something that's gonna, you know, feel good. And also, my fees went up, I think.
It's easy to critique institutions like that, but I always say that the problem isn't really the institution, it's the people that are working at these institutions are making decisions in them. And I know that with the Grammys, like certain things are supposed to remain inside and not known, but I think it is known knowledge that you've done work to sort of create another category, right? So that there's room for artists that are not necessarily straight ahead jazz musicians, but are pushing boundaries forward. If you have anything you want to say about that, because I think that's really cool now that there's opportunity for people who wouldn't otherwise be heard.
Yeah, well, I think everything evolves, and sometimes with organizations, institutions, it's hard to get them to evolve with things as they evolve. And yeah, so it's a bit of work to get really established institutions to accept something different, a new idea, and you have to go through a lot of hoops. There was a committee of us, a few of us, not an official committee, but people that had been involved with the academy, with jazz in the academy, and you know, we got together, and they had tried before, and so I'm not like taking full credit because there were definitely people, but I feel like I shook it up a little more and helped to make it harder. And it could be something like, honestly, this is like, you know, how some things work. You could have a message just delivered by the wrong person. You know what I mean?
That's true.
There could be a correct message, then somebody else is able to be heard more. And so I think I spend a lot of time, not a lot of time, I think it's a knack maybe, but I do spend some time trying to figure out how people can hear me, you know, and what's missing with this picture. Like, why isn't this being heard, you know, by a certain group or a certain person or whatever? And so how do we make it, you know, what do we have to do? If it means, you know, I step back, okay. If it means you step back, okay, let's just get this done.
Yes.
And so it's funny because, you know, we had 5 awards and now there's 6. And if you look at some of the other genres that sell much more, because we have to remember jazz sells 1.5% of all consumed music. So the people that are in hip hop that sell 33%, they're like, why are we even paying attention to jazz? You know what I mean? Like they just have, like one guy who's, you know, he was a hip hop executive. He said, oh, I said, can I, you know, they started this Black Music Collective, I said, I'd like to serve on that committee. And he said, oh, I always thought of jazz as being more white. And this was a hip hop person. I was like, wow, I would like to serve on the Black Music Collective.
Yes. Sounds insane.
Yeah, and I mean, so, those are the things that you kind of, dealing with. And there were no other jazz people in this group. And then I'm not really in it anymore, but I'm not sure. I don't think there are. There may be, one, but I don't think so. I'm not sure. But anyway, my point is, it's a lot of time, a lot of hours that you put into service work. And kind of that's what we do. I mean, music is service too, right? So then you find a way to have your voice involved in other areas of service. And is actually a jazz critic, was older white guy, and he said something that I've used within that. He's like, we shouldn't have the jazz that's created the same way jazz was created in the first 50 years of the music, competing with the jazz that's been created in the last 50 years. Of the music. And I was like, exactly. So we just kept finding different ways to say that, just to warrant another word, because, if rock or country or R&B, they're not getting any more awards because the Academy's trying to do less awards instead of more. And so, why should we do that for jazz when you're a lot smaller in population as far as support and consumption? I was like, because we're more prolific.
Yeah.
I mean, we can prove that there's going to be a couple of hundred entries in this category. You have to go and have playlists. And, luckily I have a radio show on Sirius XM called Future Flavors. And I could just, show them all the people that I play on that. So this is a category that all these people would go. And then there was, another person that has something to do with radio. And they say, oh, yeah, and this is playlist I have with people that aren't going to fare well in the jazz. Yeah. Now here's the thing, I couldn't push any further, but I really felt that jazz should be what's happening now.
Yes.
And the more mainstream jazz should have been called traditional jazz. So why don't we just make this jazz and call this whatever, because you do that in R&B, and they have traditional R&B and regular R&B. So the R&B of today is what you get. If you win a Grammy in R&B, that's the R&B of today.
Right.
If you do traditional R&B, that's going to be, whatever, a little more soulful, a little less programmed, a little, older, a little more old school, or whatever you want to call it. So why didn't they do that with jazz? Because there's going to be a lot of famous jazz people that don't like that because they don't look at themselves as being traditional. Mm-hmm. It's making them feel like they're doing something of the past. So that was my, but I couldn't.
Wow. Putting words to that, to the reality of what is happening.
But, we had to take the win, however, how we got it.
Or you can, yeah.
And in time, maybe the thing will shift, but I mean, I guess I just want to say thank you for all of the amazing things that you're doing, because you're teaching at the Institute for Jazz and Music. You're A&Ring and nurturing the next generations of musicians.
And on radio.
You're on the radio. You're doing your own gigs. You're coming to talk with us at the Skidmore. You don't sleep.
I'm going to sleep tonight, though.
I hope you sleep tonight.
How do you take care of yourself?
Let's not do that.
Okay, we won't go to
That's an ongoing
challenge.
Yeah. Yes. Can I get this walk in today? I just need a 2-mile walk if I could fit it in.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Wait. Is your radio show on Real Jazz on Sirius XM? Okay.
But it's called Future Flavors.
Future Flavors.
It's on Fridays at 6 o'clock, and then Sundays at 5 o'clock, and then Saturday in the middle of the night at 3 or something in the morning. I don't know.
So if you're tuning in, make sure you guys tap into.
I like Sirius XM. There's no commercials.
So we have this little tradition that we do. We're going to sign off, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A with you guys. But we have this little thing where we say, whatever you do, and then we ask you to say, remember to, and then together we say, make jazz trill again.
Okay.
You down?
You got it?
Okay, let's do it. All right, so once again, thank you so much, Terri Lyne, for joining us today. We hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, yet another episode of the Make Jazz Trill Again.
Yes, give it up for Terri Lyne Carrington.
And whatever you do,
Remember to
make jazz trill again.
love it.
Yes.
That was fun.
Yes. Ooh, you put us onto a lot.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, any questions?
We got a question in the audience. We have microphones coming around in the house, so you guys can be heard.
At one point, you were talking about the trend of jazz music starting as a social communal dance music, and it means to become more of an empowerment movement away from that, more towards an esoteric form of, like an art form. And continuing that trend more today, there's the trend continues to more of an isolating the music away from the audience, but also the music, you can listen to it away from the performers themselves. So as someone who doesn't really come from a community where I've experienced jazz music in my house or in my community, I would consider myself to be decently steeped in the music, but not in the experience of it. So I guess what I'm asking is, what's your reaction to that? And also for the younger generations of women who are at a predisposed disadvantage to getting experience generally, how do you see that maybe remedying that or taking that trend and pivoting it in the future years?
Well, I mean, that's, I think, why I started this institute, to try to, create a space for people, I'm trying to think of how you said it, but people that don't, I forget how you just said it. My memory's not good at recalling. But, yeah, trying to make a space for people that aren't getting that early support, specifically, but not only young women, but especially for them, because those are the people that are marginalized in the jazz community for the most part. I'm not talking about vocalists, because it's always been kind of an unwritten rule that, men play the music and women sing it. So when people say, oh, there's women in jazz, they're talking about mostly vocalists. But how to change it is what we're doing, and it's everybody's job. So I think the question is, you ask yourself as well, how do I contribute to this change? And so you have to look at what you support, how you think about the music, what you think sounds good, what ticket stubs you have saved, what albums you bought, what concerts you go to. And you have power in helping to make that shift. It's not, often, people leave it up to, people that are being oppressed to get themselves out of it. So we have to, think about it differently and see what can we do to support this change that is needed. Now your first part of your question, I'm still trying to, I think I lost the first part. You said you weren't raised in a household with jazz, but I might be able to hear you better if you don't use that mic. Yeah.
Like in terms of streaming music or listening to music online, I would consider myself pretty steeped in the music of it, but less so going to see it in the experience of it. So I remember at one point you were talking about you've had students who came from Japan or Korea who asked you how to play with black feel. And it sounds sounds silly, but it's a real valid question. If you don't have that experience, you weren't raised into it, how do you go about respectfully wanting to be able to
Yeah, I think
I
you,
like respectfully.
Yeah.
yeah, I think you learn about the culture, and if you humbly, you know, learn about the culture. I mean, jazz is for everyone. You know, it's in. There's so many people outside of the African American community that play it and play it well, and so many, especially nowadays. You know, we're able to have these conversations. You know, there's so many. Like I play, two of my favorite musicians that are in my band are white musicians, Matthew Stevens and Aaron Parks. But you know, when they, you know, talk about playing it, they say, yeah, we play, you know, African American music. You know, like they're super clear, you know, about those things, and they've done the studying, and they know more than I do about certain things. I mean, which is an interesting phenomenon because, like, I'm friends with this woman. Her name is Sona Jobarta, and this is a bit of a sidebar, but it gives you, it's similar in jazz, I guess. But she's the first female griot. If you do not know who she is, check her out. Sona Jobarta, 60 Minutes has done, you know, a spread on her, and because griot is patriarchal. There's 6 instruments: kora, balafon. There's, you know, 6 instruments that they play, and they're only from 6 families. So if you're not in one of those families' bloodline, you're not a griot. And so she was in this family. It's a long story. I won't go into it, but somehow she ended up. Her mother's from England, and is white, but her father is this master drummer. What is the
Djembe?
instrument? No, it's not djembe. Anyway, he's a master, and she demanded that he teach her. So she goes to Africa, and her mother basically leaves her there. So she's raised by her grandparents, and then her father leaves and lives in Norway. And then she went to him and demanded that he teach her because she wanted to play kora. No, he was a master kora player, not the drum. But and only reason why he taught her is because they were in Norway. Because if he was in Africa, he wouldn't have been able to teach her. Because it's only passed down male to male. And they have so many kids in these families because they have to have this tradition continue. And either you have it or you don't, and they don't force it on you. So they have a lot of kids to make sure some of them are going to be these griot musicians. Wow. And so she had the calling, and she had it, the talent, but she was not male. And so he taught her. So he had to go back to, they're from Gambia, and he had to go back there and ask permission to teach her, even though he'd already taught her, I guess, and permission for her to be and I guess when they heard her, they couldn't deny it. And so she's the first woman to be a griot. I find it fascinating. Yeah. And but the one thing she said, the reason why I thought of that is because she said, so she went back to London, and then she realized that she started a school in Gambia, but then she realized that people in London and Germany knew more about this griot tradition and more about the instruments and more about the history than the people in Gambia.
Oh my God. Wow.
So she's like, wow, there's something wrong with this. So she, went back to Gambia, and she started a school to teach them about their own, history and culture. So I don't know, something you said reminded me of that, because you don't have to be from a place to understand the culture. You just have to put the time in. I mean, we have to do it all the time. Like, I have to be able to, that's so many layers to that. We code switch, we do all kinds of things because there's like this level of assimilating that you have to do to, I love this generation because they're saying, no, we're not doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm 59, I don't know if I could stop. That's my goal, that's my freedom goal. Yeah. Let me not assimilate and just really be me 100% of the time, all the time, and let the chips fall where they may. That's hard.
Yes, it is.
That's really hard. So you have to put the time in to, and it's a very welcoming art form. And if you want it, you can learn about it, the culture and all of that, and get that bug Because if anybody's interested in jazz, you have to have the, I feel like you've gotten bitten by a jazz bug.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Because why would you do this?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
it's
gotta be
definitely not for the faint
Why
of
would you
fortune.
feed into your self-talk of being so critical on yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's like so hard to pull off.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Yeah.
But it's the joy of the music that really.
You got another
Exactly.
question? Zach.
Hey Terry, how you doing? So I have a quick question. One, are you inspired by films? And if so, what's your top 5 films?
Ooh, films.
Woo, goodness, I am. I don't know what the inspiration is. It's not like inspired musically, but just creatively, I guess, Wow, that's a good one. Top 5.
That's a lot.
I'm always telling people about movies to watch.
Movies too.
Now you got me on the spot, like which ones do I even pick? Okay, so this came to mind, The 13th Floor. I like that movie a lot. I won't talk about it because it would be a spoiler. Usual Suspects, I like that one. Crazy movie, Memento.
I like Memento.
Oh yeah, that one's crazy.
Yeah. The Manchurian Candidate. Not the Denzel one, the old one, Frank Sinatra.
Oh, I never seen that one.
Huh?
I didn't know there was. I thought that was the original one, the one with Denzel.
The Denzel one? Oh,
Yeah.
no. That's actually, if you see the original one, you're like, oh, they blew it.
Oh, it's upset.
It starred
The
Frank
Manchurian
Sinatra and
Candidate.
Janet Leigh and Lawrence, I forget his last name.
Fishburne?
No, Frank Sinatra and Janet Leigh, so this is long before.
Oh,
Lawrence
sorry, I didn't hear what you
time.
said at first. I just heard films and then Lawrence. And
Yeah,
Lawrence
no, I forget his name. But anyway, excellent movie. And they had shelved the movie, so I was living in New York in the 80s when it came out. It was filmed like in the 60s, but they shelved it because of the topic. And if you saw the new one, you know what the topic was. But it was too close with presidential assassinations and stuff. It was too close, conspiracy thoughts,
Yep.
too close to what was actually happening in the 60s. So they didn't let the movie come out for like 20 years.
Wow.
So I was like super interested in it when it came out because it was a new movie that had been filmed 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And Frank Sinatra, he's really a great actor. And there's a book, this is a sidebar, but if you're interested in these kinds of things, I like Hollywood stuff because I just do. And there's a book called My Life with Mr. S. And it's written by his black butler, or I don't know if he's butler, valet.
Oh.
That's the word. His black valet, it's a tell-all. He waited to the end of his life because he didn't want to be assassinated. And
Oh, it's
this
like that.
book is a tell-all.
Tea,
It's
if you like
so
tea.
good.
I want to read that.
Yeah, it's so good. It's just, I've never read anything like it. But the one thing that I just thought about is he really took his singing more seriously than his acting, even though he's very good at both. And he was a one-take guy with both acting and singing.
Wow.
He got it all in one take. Like, if you messed up and you were in the orchestra,
Oh no.
that you didn't get called again because you can't mess up because they're all recorded in the same room.
Yeah,
my God.
Yeah.
He's
Frank
gonna
did
get it
so-
in one take.
Yeah.
You can't be the one that messed up.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, it's really a fascinating.
Terrible.
It's fascinating to read, but his work ethic. But with acting, it was more natural, I think, to him, and he didn't take it quite as seriously. But he still only did one take. Like but he would like party all night long and show up to the set to act in the tuxedo from the night before, go take a shower in the dressing room and go do his lines, one take, and that was it. But with singing, he would never do that because, your voice is going to be right. So with singing, because he had to hold this image up, he would have a fake drink. So if you see him in a studio with a drink, it's literally like apple juice or something on ice to look like it's whiskey.
Oh.
Because he wouldn't drink before he sang. But acting, he would just show up drunk and still
Put it all
do
in
it.
the work.
Wow.
Fascinating.
There are some students here. I wanted to hear what you guys wanted to ask.
I'll get you the other 2 movies later. I think I did 3 or
Like
4.
horror movies?
I love horror.
Terri Lyne? You like horror movies?
No, I don't mess with horror.
Hi.
Hi.
So my friend had a question, but he had to leave. His question is, as women of color in a male-dominated industry, do you ever find yourselves, have you ever experienced biases that harm other women that you or someone else has experienced?
Say that last part again.
Have you ever experienced biases in the male-dominated industry that you all work in? And like, have you seen it harm yourself or other women?
Seen it harm
Yes.
yourself or other women?
Yes, the bias.
Oh yeah, the biases. Yeah, it's constant. It's yeah, the job is to how to unharm, like how to undo the harm, how to live in a way that you know that you're not just accepting it, you're not living with it, but that you're working through so that it doesn't happen, and to not duplicate it or replicate it, because that's the really big problem I see. Or have seen. These things are changing. So I don't like to talk in the absolutes because things are definitely different than they were. But women will replicate what they see, the harm that they experience, and replicate it. I mean, I was guilty of it myself in teaching, for instance. You know, like being taught a certain way and not realizing that it was harmful maybe to me, and then replicating that when I teach. You know, so I think that's one point. I'm glad that you brought that up, even though that's not exactly answering your question. I think that women are just as guilty of participating and benefiting from patriarchy than as many male counterparts.
Yeah.
So I think we have to examine ourselves, because I think we don't realize it often when we're doing that. But yes, the short answer to your question would be yes, and we're all trying to do better.
So earlier in the podcast recording, you were talking about sort of the institutionalization of jazz and how you were feeling maybe like kind of some qualms with jazz academia, if that's what you would call it. And I just wanted to know if either 3 of you have felt like going to school and doing jazz school has like stifled your creativity or your expression, or if it's aided in it at all.
I mean, I'll go first, but I think it's education is there for you to do what you want with it. So I think that you can't let it stifle. If you don't want it to stifle you, then it doesn't have to stifle you. You have to just get what it has to offer. It's kind of become a necessary evil, so to say, to get jobs if you're trying to teach, because the bar keeps changing, right? You used to have a bachelor's degree to teach, and it became a master's degree, and now you have to damn near be a PhD to do anything, you know? So the bar keeps raising. I have theories about that, but that's another conversation. So I think when I was talking before about self-discovery, you have to make the school work for you. And you don't have to let it stifle you at all. I mean, there's something Henry Threadgill, who's an amazing composer and, Pulitzer Prize winner, and I had him come on a Zoom during COVID to one of my classes, and he said, first of all, I don't understand why you guys go to school. Like he said, when I went to school, I went to learn. And he said, in fact, I was on a scholarship, and I took every class the school had to offer. He figured out to stay as long as possible And while he was getting a free education, he said they finally had to kick me out and say, like, listen, we don't have any more classes for you. You know, so he said, I went to learn. And I really love that, you know, just that thought of, I'm going to take every class that you can offer me. And he's, you know, kind of, you know, people hail him as a genius. And so he just was a great example of, and he's a hardcore, like, AACM guy from Chicago. So he just didn't let this academy stifle him whatsoever, but he took all the information and did his own thing with it.
I'd say from my experience, I appreciate you saying that because it's forcing me to change my perspective too. When I went through being a student in jazz, after coming out, I was living under a jazz rock, per se. In the particular program that I went through, my frustrations that I had was that I felt like my taste was very narrowed and very much elitist after coming out of school and thinking that jazz was the only good music that exists. Like having good music versus bad music. And it kind of closed, I felt like it closed my mind off at that time to be open to other genres and collaboration. But I'm out of that now and grown out of it because I grew frustrated just by having relationships with other people and musicians and working in the landscape of the world instead of the bubble of that institution. So that, for me, it was a little bit detrimental in terms of thinking that a particular style of jazz in a certain way was the best and the only way to do it. So that's kind of where, for me, I had to fight against that internally. So that was just a struggle internally, not necessarily, I don't know if I should blame that on the school or not, but yeah. That's my experience.
I guess real quick for me, I think school made me feel like it kind of created this aura of like, this is right, this is wrong. Mm-hmm. And I sort of had to unlearn that. I'm still unlearning that, that there's so many ways to approach this thing that we call jazz or music at large. So yeah, it's very easy, I think, to go into this black and white space. Mm-hmm. And like Terri Lyne is saying, your job is to take what you can and leave the rest.
Yeah, exactly.
So, good question. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terri.
Later.
Yeah. Taking questions away from the students.